Once again, Hillary Clinton is not in the studio. She will not be here tonight, and her president, Donald Trump, will not be here either. And so, once again, we're trying to look at the landscape of the Republican Party and the Democrats and all of that. I mean, oh my, this is getting tiring. Perhaps we need to read a tweet or two, but tonight we're going to focus in on Bob Graves and what he has to say about Roy Moore and Republicans and Dems. And so let me go to Bob real quick. Hello, Bob.
Well, hello, and hopefully people can hear me clearly now. It's yeah,
Hopefully
good to be
so.
here.
Yeah.
And I think this should be an interesting conversation. But chances are, hear us out. I think that it's going to be perhaps a little troubling to both Democrats and Republicans.
That's so true. We're going to have a lot of fun tonight. I really want to get you irritated like you were the other night. I mean, that's what makes this show rock. If I can just get up underneath your skin a bit. Hello, Daryl. What's going on?
Hello. Well, it's good to be back and to be, as Bob said, to be heard. I know it's probably not that much fun just looking at our face and watching our lips move. So this should be much better now.
Okay. Now we have a PreSonus, couple of Yamahas, and another audio mixer all tied together to get the complex of monitor, sound system, and everything that goes on YouTube and so on. And so we had some mess ups, and it's not Bob's fault. He is one amazing sound engineer. And one of the things that we're learning here in this studio, and for the rest of you guys who have a studio, protocol is everything. And I can say this, when I listen to Bob, we don't go wrong. It's because he knows his stuff. And this is something that is really, really nice. We're able to do something these days. I can simply call Bob up on my cell phone. We can FaceTime and he can see it and, oh, wow, no, it's not this or that. And so it's like him being here. And when he was in Pensacola, the only thing that he was afraid of was, yes, you're right, alligators. And so alligators are not Bob's best friend. However, if you are getting a good audio signal from Bob and Daryl, give us a thumbs up and give us a like or something like that. I mean, goodness gracious, we're going to get into the show. And so, Daryl, talk to me for a moment, and we're going to get right into the substance.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing Bob's take on Roy Moore. It should be a very interesting subject. Also, Democrats and Republicans. So I'm ready to hear him go for it, getting fired up.
Okay, I don't think that Bob is going to say I'm with her, namely Hillary, tonight. I would bet money on that. Is that true, Bob?
That's very true. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I so wish that Bernie and Jane would come to this studio. I mean, they have so much to add, that is, to America, the globe. I mean, all of us. I mean, they have really a heart for people, and I can't wait to have people like that in the studio, because it's like they really care. And what say you, Bob?
Well, I certainly get that impression that Bernie is on a different par. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, you keep on forgetting he's a politician." That's giving into the stereotype. Now it's very easy to give into the stereotype because there's a lot of politicians who are playing the politician game, and you're probably better off suspecting that they are until you have, confident reason to think otherwise. I like Tulsi Gabbard a great deal, and I actually, even on the other side of the aisle, I think that McCain has at times been very careful in his thinking, and is willing to go against the party if he really perceives things to really be different than the way his party is putting it. So I like people who can think for themselves and take somewhat of a responsible, self-determined stance instead of the tribalistic thing. It's very unfortunate because in politics in this country, people become extremely one-dimensional. It is amazing how finding just one problem with an opponent you don't like is all you need, and finding just one redeeming feature of the opponent of your party, or excuse me, not the opponent, but the representative of your party is all you need to feel that this is the person that everyone ought to be choosing. By the way, something that is still going on, the election was over in November last year. It's been a year since the election, and Trump was installed in January, and here we are in December, and people are still trying to find the blame for why Hillary lost. And to me, it's not stupid that people are still trying to analyze it. I think they need to analyze it. In fact, I wish they would get started analyzing it. They're not. They're looking for the blame. And people say, oh, if you didn't vote for Hillary, that's why Trump won. And then other people are saying, well, if they hadn't nominated Hillary, then Bernie would have won. And all this blaming. The truth is, every single election is based upon a wide number of factors, none of them sufficient in and of themselves to determine who the winner will be. And in every election, you have diehard Republicans and diehard Democrats who are going to vote regardless of who's up there for their party. And as a result, the person who ends up being the winner in any given contest is the winner because of the people who are not diehard are either wooed one way or the other. And it is the failure of all of the factors coming together to win over those people in the center. The fact that there may be some people who are very much opposed is in and of itself insignificant in any election. And so, the fact that they put up somebody like Hillary Clinton is as much to blame as to why we have Trump as the fact that there's some people who said never Hillary. You can't be blaming each other. People have a right to not want to vote for Hillary, and people have a right to want to. And don't be belly aching about what somebody else does with their vote. It's not your vote; it's their vote, and they get to vote whatever way they want to for whatever reasons make sense to them. And although you might have a conversation, you don't get say in what they do. And you have to accept that. And so if you're not going to recognize all the rules and all the dynamics that go on, and you don't prevail, it's because, well, you didn't cross all your T's and dot all your I's. And so, in that case, from a standpoint of democracy and proper procedure, you don't deserve to win if you don't win, Now, there can be corruption, there can be other things going on, but to me, there's so much nonsense and people refusing to accept responsibility for the way this turned out. We were in a place here where always picking the lesser of two evils has brought us to a point where both parties are very vulnerable to a populist explosion. And I think that that's what happened with Donald Trump, that he came out as a non-politician, as it were, and appealed with a very populist group of people and who were tired of business as usual. And some of the things that he actually said during the early campaigns, as outrageous as they may have seemed to the people who are diehard Democrats, he said a lot of things that appealed to people who've had it up to here. And as a result, it's not surprising that he won. Hillary, good or bad as she is, whatever, she didn't really campaign in a manner that resonated with a populist movement in any manner. And the populist movement that could have put her over the edge, she and the DNC offended them deeply and told them to grow up and said all sorts of things to them that only, so it's like, well, if you're going to offend the people that you need, don't expect to win.
I want Rick to do me a favor. I want you to set up the clip that we have prepared. This is going to be difficult. It's funny. It's something that Jimmy Kimmel, his team put together. It's very well put together, but it nuances a couple of things that I want people to pay attention to because we want to talk about this tonight. Jake Byrd, this guy is funny. He's hilarious. But what isn't so funny is that the church that he goes into is not atypical here in the South. It's so typical. It's, I mean, for those of you guys who live elsewhere, you're so lucky. I mean, so fortunate. But here in the South, we have these kinds of churches everywhere, and people are defending these kinds of places as well. Let me not get into a rant or anything like that, because that wouldn't be appropriate, would it be? And so I can't see what you're saying. Are you ready to go? Okay. If you're ready to play that clip, if you're an atheist or even a theist, please consider what we have to go through here in the South, that is in these kinds of churches and with these kinds of politicians and all of that. And so with that said, let's play that clip and enjoy.
Jake Byrd here. I'm in Alabama, where the libtard media is giving Judge Roy Moore the business. Come on, let's go defend him no matter what. 2, 4, 6, 8. We don't care what age he dates. Roy Moore, Roy Moore. I'm at the mall. Roy Moore, Roy Moore.
I mean, if anybody is stupid enough to where they believe these lies, well, they deserve the Democrats and the rhinos.
Exactly. The lying liberal media.
Yeah.
Honestly, who would you rather have? Okay, Roy, warts and all, sexual predator, whatever, or a Democrat?
I don't want no Democrat.
Okay, so we'll go sexual predator.
But
Thank you
he's
very
not
much.
a sexual
Okay,
predator.
but you know, alleged.
Alleged.
Let me ask you this.
But this is ridiculous. And this is Washington, D.C., and this is everywhere now.
We
and
don't
I'm
need
sick of
big
it.
government telling us we can't date little people. This lady is right, which is rare because women have been liars. Okay? My mom gave my 7th grade teacher permission to date me, and that turned out pretty good. Judge Roy Moore.
Okay.
Up top. Hashtag more to come. Listen, I worked at the Gadley Mall back during those Roy Moore days, okay? And I was at Miller's Outpost, and Mr. Moore came in one day in a huff, sweating, said, you gotta hide me, because the Nazi gazpacho security guards were after him. I put him in a changing room. 10 minutes later, I fitted him with a nice pair of high-waisted cords and a cute top. Couldn't have been nicer. Couldn't have been nicer. He was a true gentleman. Nay, gentle friend.
Okay.
Now, the judge would come into the movie theater. Couldn't have been nicer. He'd come up, he'd order himself a popcorn. He'd always make sure whatever candy he got for his date wouldn't get caught in their braces. Complete gentleman. He's got my vote. And I don't care what he did in that theater.
He's got my vote too as
No matter
well.
what he did to me.
Because, you know,
He's not a Democrat.
this was before Judge Roy Moore was even an elected official.
Yeah, right. He wasn't an elected official when he was doing that stuff.
He was an
It shouldn't-
assistant
It
DA.
shouldn't count. It doesn't count.
No, it doesn't.
We don't care what he did. We're not going to elect a Democrat.
That's it.
That's it. We
That's
do
it.
not care what you did as long as you're not a Democrat.
Yep.
This is what I'm getting out of
Exactly.
it. They think everybody in Alabama is stupid. For them to come up with that stuff and think we're going to believe it.
Why should we believe
I'm a
women?
woman.
Why should we believe those women?
Hey, I'm a woman,
We don't believe her.
and there ain't no way that a man would fool with me, and I wouldn't let him
That's
and that know
not
about
true.
it.
That's not true.
Oh, yes, it
You
is.
give me 2 wine coolers and see where this goes.
I don't drink wine.
Not for you.
Now, wait a minute. I ain't never drank, smoked, fool with narcotics, I had an affair. Now, don't you say I've lived a double life.
No, you have not, but the
I'm a
night's about to get a
Christian.
lot more interesting.
No.
Now, I'll tell you something. If you were 140 years younger, Roy Moore would be all over you.
Oh, no.
Go get him, Judge.
Not only am I being opposed by the Democrats who want to push a liberal agenda, I'm being opposed by the Washington establishment who don't want to change what anything's going on in Washington, D.C. They're the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender who want to change our culture. Never once has anyone stated anything like it has occurred in the last 3.5 weeks.
But the whole
That's odd.
The entire time. All the girls are lying.
5 statewide
Why would they lie?
and 3 countywide campaigns. We can stop it and get them out, or we
Hey,
can
come on,
keep
get
on.
out of here, dude. We're here for the judge. We're here for the judge. He's a man's man. The judge is a man's man.
Let's let
You got this, Judge. You got this. Don't listen to him. Get out of here. That's a man's man. Does that look like the face of a molester?
I would remind everyone again that the next one who makes disturbance will be turned over to the police.
No more sissies. No more sissies.
I would repeal Obamacare. I would repeal it tomorrow.
No more medicine.
Transgender troops, he favors, and he opposes Trump's ban on transgender troops.
I'm his number one fan. You're kicking out your number one fan, Judge. Your number one fan. You know what? Because I believe in the judge. And I don't believe in the ladies who are lying. Does that look like the face of someone who hits on teenage girls? No. That's a man's man. That's an American right there. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you.
This man repeatedly interrupted individual interviews. He was asked to leave after he stood up and shouted, "Does that look like someone who hits on teenage girls?"
A more supporter who announced he was the former judge's number one fan was also removed.
I was just trying to let the judge know that he's the man's man, and it turned everyone freaked. They freaked. Thanks for understanding. Well, looks like I got a little too loud with the old wordsies. Kind of like those teenage girls that couldn't keep a secret. Don't worry, Roy, you still got my support. Second vote. Bye.
That is just too funny. We're talking about Roy Stewart Moore, born in 1947. He's an American politician and former Alabama state judge. He was twice elected as Chief Justice of the state of Alabama Supreme Court and twice removed by the Alabama court. Wow, for violating the Alabama canons of judicial ethics. Let me read a little bit more of this because I think that we need to be informed on this. Moore was elected to the position of Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court in 2001, but was removed from his position in November 2003 by the Alabama court for refusing to remove a monument of the Ten Commandments commissioned by him from the Alabama Judicial Building. Despite the orders to do so by a federal court, after being removed from the court, Moore twice sought the Republican nomination for the governorship of Alabama in 2006 and also in 2010, but lost in the primaries. Moore was again elected Chief Justice in 2013, but was suspended in May 2016 for directing probate judges to continue to enforce the state's ban on same-sex marriage. Can you believe that? That's crazy. Despite the fact that this had been deemed unconstitutional. And so, Bob, what are your thoughts? I mean, what do you think about that video, first of all?
Well, the guy was particularly clever. He was obviously insincere in his apparent position. But it amazed me how some of the people that he talked to didn't really catch on quite quickly that he was pushing it beyond the edge. A couple of them did, but some of them didn't. In fact, when he started saying some rather outlandish tribalistic things, he got some strong confirmation, which is in some ways disturbing. Now, obviously, from just even some things that you read there, that this judge has been somewhat of a rogue. He's operating from his own personal point of view, which he's entitled to have as a person. But as a judge, he's there to uphold the law. And one of the things that's true of a judge is there to uphold the due process of their courtrooms based on what the law is, not necessarily what they want the law to be. And a good judge will realize that even when the laws are other than the way they would prefer they are, they still have to maintain due process based on what the law is, and can be, as he was, dismissed for failing to do that, you know? So,
Let me ask you a question. What do you think the appeal is? That is, why would anyone want to vote for Roy Moore in any context?
well, I would imagine that, you know, if you are a dedicated conservative Republican, and if you are a person who, some of these people who are, first of all, they're at a church, so I imagine they possess a fundamentalist faith where they really do sincerely believe that lesbians and gays are part of that which is going to bring upon this country the judgment of God, and that this way they can blame all of the things that aren't going right in America on that, you know, and certainly not have to accept any responsibility that they've played any role in it. But you know, so I mean, if that's your bias, well, you don't want somebody in there who's going to be for all those things you're against. And he is a man who is quite clear in the fact that he has these personal beliefs and personal standing that a lot of people, well, let's put it this way. There's a lot of people who genuinely want this country to be something other than what it really has been or is. And some of them are not necessarily well educated to the point where they don't understand that there's a bit of pluralism going on in this country. And as a result, we have a process of government that is supposed to allow for prevailing opinions to work their way through the system, and you can't guarantee that it's always going to be something you agree with, you know. But these people are not interested in the system working. They want it to be their way, and
Well-
if they can't have it their way, they're going to just champion anybody who looks like they want to push it their way, without regard to what problems there may be attending it. So, you know, so I can understand where people come from, but it comes from an extremely narrow point of view and tunnel vision that is looking to win the day with these ideas. You know, when people like, well, that's another issue, so I won't bring that up. But you know, it is an extreme tunnel vision, and if you have that tunnel vision and you perceive these things as being key and important, you're going to support whatever candidate comes along that looks like they're going to be able to give you these things that you want, no matter what other situations are going on. But it is amazing to me in that video how many people felt that these people are lying. Now,
Right.
people can lie, but you know, and it is also epistemologically true that we weren't there. We don't know what's going on. But there's such a thing as what we call clustering. That is that it's not so much where there's smoke, there's fire, but when there's a lot of smoke, a lot of times in a lot of different areas, you've got to begin to wonder if somebody's starting fires, you know? And so when there's a number of people who are making similar claims, when there are a number of reports and that maintain a certain viable realism, you know, you have to at least raise your eyebrow and wonder what might be going on. And some of these diehard people aren't the least bit interested in doing it, particularly the way they said, you know, oh, better that than a Democrat, you know. And
You know, when I look at the pew sitters, it seems like, and this is just my opinion, but it seems like they feel like democracy is working very, very well, especially when their candidate is in office. And so let me ask this question in light of a particular quote. And I'm going to read this. In the strict sense of the term, and I want your thoughts on this, in the strict sense of the term, a true democracy has never existed and never will exist. It is against natural order that the great number should be, it's against natural order that the great number should govern and that the few should be governed. Do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that the statement has some truth in it, but I think it's also filled with a lot of biased assumptions. It's against the natural order, says who? Our traditions are not necessarily according to natural order, but traditions that were set in place by people who possessed the power at the time those traditions were instituted. And as time goes on, any instituted procedure feels normal to even other people who would not have necessarily instituted them. And so just the fact that there may be certain ways in which people have governed themselves. I mean, look at we used to have kings and feudal systems and lords and things like this, and we used to have slavery, and we have as the human race has modernized and matured, we've moved more towards democratic ideas. Now, I think it's true, depending on how you define it, there's never been a complete democracy, but I don't know that it's against the natural order. I think it's also true that a true democracy is, depending on what you mean by that. I mean, when Congress is voting on something, they don't send out an election and we all vote on what's going on in the House or the Senate. No, these people are representatives. So in a sense, our democracy elects representatives, and we have a representative republic. So here, this isn't a true democracy in that sense, and it would be extremely impossible for a country our size, our large population, to be settling all of our questions democratically. So what we have are democratically, supposedly elected representatives who then are charged with representing us, and then they deliberate democratically among themselves for the purposes of making those final decisions in legislating. So I mean, depending on how you define democracy.
But let me see if I can nuance a point by quoting from Abraham Lincoln, simply because I think that even people who have become president seem to think that democracy is not a reality as to what we have. Abraham Lincoln stated in 1856, the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. Would you agree with that?
Definitely. But then again, we've actually created that atmosphere. We tell people they shouldn't, in good company, it's impolite to talk about religion or politics. I say bullshit. The reason that we're so stupid when it comes to whether we're in Alabama or New York or Florida, when it comes to politics, is because we haven't developed a methodology for a polite and civil conversation about it, where it's really permitted to take place, and people just allow themselves to seethe in the passions of their fantasies on their own and only with their tribe, which is of all the ways of thinking clearly, critical thinking skills, that's got to be one of the worst ways of making sure that your thinking is honest, sincere, genuine, and well thought out. Sorry. We need to have these conversations. We need to have them publicly. We need to have them with people that disagree with us, and they need to be as civil as possible. But so I think that the average voter does tend to be uneducated in these issues. But also, I think it's also true that that for one thing, people in power know they need to talk like they are in favor of democracy, because if they don't, the people will rebel. So if you can talk up democracy while nonetheless the levers of power are restricted to those people that are the quote important people, well then you can play the game. And in fact, the inverted totalitarianism is defined in a sense by causing all of the talk to be as if we're really serving democracy, but where all the levers that really make the decision are still controlled and bought out by a certain elite. And so that way you don't know who's really in control, but it's certainly not the people. Now, I also think that democracy, let me just say one last thing. Democracy is slow, kludgy, and requires a great deal of trial and error. But I think that eventually what happens with people, if they are truly given democracy, is that they can learn from their mistakes because they're able to make their mistakes and put their mistakes into law with the ability to then backtrack on it should they decide that was bad. But that's not the way it really works, and so it is a bit kludgy, a bit perverted, and a bit corrupted.
Okay. Winston Churchill, I think he's the one who nuanced this. Democracy substitutes election by the incompetent many for appointment by the corrupt few. Was he right?
I think so. But the solution to a dumbed down population is to educate them, and by education, that doesn't mean coming up with a curriculum you think that they need to follow. And I'll tell you, I've even said this, that an education that merely prepares you for a job is not an education.
Yeah.
It isn't. And our educational system, I agree with John Taylor Gatto, who wrote the book Dumbing Us Down. Dumbing Us Down, I think was the title of it, where he talks about our educational system is really designed to convert us into compliant people. Our debt is intended to create us into people who don't dare rock the boat. We're not going to be too dissident because we can't afford to be. And so, I think that we've got many challenges to having a functioning democracy, but when you have a dumbed down population, the answer isn't to find a way of sneaking the decisions away from them. Educate them. Not everyone is going to be interested in voting. Not everyone is going to be educated enough, but we can do better.
Now, Karl Marx made a statement, and let me read this because I wanted to go back and simply pull out some quotes, simply because the manner in which you respond to something that we haven't talked about before the show always turns out golden. Karl Marx said, "Democracy is the road to socialism." Do you think that's true?
Well, here again, it depends on how you define socialism. Socialism has rarely been tried in a manner that is really socialism. A purer definition of socialism, and it's certainly not the only one out there, is when the manufacturing, distribution, and exchange of goods and services is controlled by those who are, have stake in the deal, those who are creating, those who are consuming, those who are, and as a result, it is a community controlled thing. Now, what has happened is people who wanted to try socialism have been promised socialism, and what are they given? They're given a government that becomes totalitarian, claiming that it's making its decisions for the people, but it doesn't. So and people are talking about how Venezuela has been struggling here as an example of what socialism does. I guarantee you, when the vast majority of people are not happy with what the government is doing, that's not a socialist circumstance, because the people are absolutely not in control. Others, but if you're going to be honest about the history of what's going on in Venezuela, there's a great deal of corporate buyout, a great deal of corporate influence, and it's all behind the scenes. There's a great deal of bribery. There's a great deal of corruption, and what people really want is really not what's going on. And when you realize a great deal of things that have been going on even throughout Central America and South America, where there are people who have been wanting higher wages or better benefits or safer working conditions. These people get lied about as if they're socialists or as if they're communists, and they become targets of a military kind of operation to get rid of them as insurgents or something like that. And we think that we're doing this for freedom's sake, and what we're doing is we're really we're lying to ourselves about it. So I think that so it depends on what you're talking about in socialism. Does democracy become socialism? I think so. But that all depends on how you define both of them.
Okay, let's talk about Nicodemus and Jesus for a moment. They're having this conversation. Nicodemus starts out in John chapter 3 complimenting Jesus by saying something like this. He said, no one could have ever done all of this stuff if they, were not from God. And so Jesus doesn't take the compliment. He actually offers Nicodemus something a bit different. So let me read what Jesus said. The difference between a democracy and a dictatorship is that in a democracy, you vote first and take orders later. In a dictatorship, you don't have to waste your time voting.
And in an inverted totalitarianism, you only receive options and choices that have already been pre-selected for you. I guarantee you, democracy is not practiced on election day. Democracy is practiced on the day of the nomination process. That's where democracy is really practiced. There have been people who've even said, I don't care who you put on the ballot. What I want to do is I want to have control over who goes on the ballot, and then I'm happy. If you can control that, then that's where the real power is, and that's where democracy would really happen. And that's where a lot of the fooling around can go. Now, I got to be honest with you. I'm not a Republican. I'm not a Democrat either. But this last convention we had, I think that the Republicans were far more honest in allowing a candidate to rise to the top that initially was not what the leadership wanted, but based upon the rules that they played by and that they stuck to, he emerged, and much to their disappointment. And he did. Whereas in the Democratic process of coming up with a candidate, there seemed to be a populist candidate coming up and around, and many efforts were done by leadership to try to make sure that it wouldn't happen. And they were, and of course we now know things like the DNC was struggling financially, and therefore made this financial deal with the Hillary Clinton campaign, who was helping to finance the DNC in exchange for control over certain of the decisions and the vetting and the money. And as a result, there was all kinds of things going on that we're going to guarantee that no matter what happened, it was going to be Hillary. And in doing so, other people who really thought there was going to be a genuine democratic process, when they found themselves denied, they became a little bit tiffed. Then when they became a little bit tiffed, they were told to grow up. And then when they, many of them were even kicked out of the convention. Their seats were replaced, and so it's like, I'm sorry, but there wasn't that much integrity over there, but real democracy takes place more so, in the nominating process, though.
Okay, I'm going to read another quote, and it sounds like Bernie, possibly, but it's not Bernie, okay? We can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we can't have both.
I'm not sure. I don't know, but I do think that democracy doesn't mean that everyone is identical.
Right.
It doesn't. There will be people who are far more productive. There will be people who are far more talented, far more skilled, and far more productive, and they'll acquire more for themselves. And in a democracy, that can happen. But when we're talking about extreme inequity, I think that a real democracy would. This is one of the reasons why, by the way, some people talk about wealth redistribution. I'm against wealth redistribution, but I'm certainly not against stealth restitution. Think about it. If you have a standard job and you work for some company, who decides who gets hired? You or somebody else?
Right.
Who decides what the work is going to be? You or somebody else? Who decides whether we're going to make widgets or splotches? Somebody else. Who decides what the prices will be? Somebody else. Who decides what we're going to do with whatever profits that come up? Somebody else. Now, it's not at all surprising that when somebody else makes all of those decisions, that they will make those decisions based upon what's best for them, and not necessarily what's best for the people who don't make the decisions. And so as a result, everybody has an overblown sense of their own contribution to society. So although I'm not against capitalism per se, when you have a certain group of elite capitalists who are making all those decisions that include who's going to get how much of the pie after the profits have been received, it's not surprising that they think they deserve most of them. And as a result, because they think they deserve most of them, when the taxation becomes more progressive, or when people say, well, we want higher wages, they say, well, this is wealth, or if you won't pay them more, then they want you to be paying more in taxes, and then the government to kind of provide them with benefits. They claim that this is wealth redistribution. No, it's not. Even just using those terms have the end contained in the beginning, because it isn't right to take somebody else's wealth away from them and give it to others. That isn't right. But when you have control of all that thing and you bring all that wealth to yourself, you're grabbing more of the pie because you have control over the pie than you should have. You're not, productivity has gone way up, but wages haven't. Why? Because the people making the decisions make the decisions that think that because they've directed the company where the productive has gone up, in spite of the fact that it is the employees who have been doing the productive work, they just recognize the significance of their own contribution in leading the company, but they don't recognize the significance of the contribution of the workers. So there's a bias that is at work here and unrestricted. It's there's no discipline in here. So I think this is capitalism gone wrong. And if capitalism doesn't turn itself around, it's going to kill itself. I think capitalism can be a great, great thing, but this is not capitalism.
Okay, there is a guy that I was a big fan of. His name is Walter Cronkite. Do you remember him?
And that's the way it is. Yes.
Okay.
I remember Walter Cronkite,
Yeah.
sure.
I mean, Walter, in my opinion, was a true journalist. But he makes this statement, and I agree with it, but I think it's a little bit overreaching. But I think that journalism is something that we desperately need. He states, journalism is what we need to make democracy work. Do you think that's true?
I think that journalism is a significant instrument in any democracy. However, it's vitally important that journalists be independent. And it used to be that they were. Walter Cronkite was. When Walter Cronkite was the chief anchor at CBS News, there were, the budget for the news was required by the FCC as part of the service back to the community based upon the fact that they were granted an FCC license to broadcast. All broadcasters were required to take a certain time of their broadcast and serve the community with that. And as a result, news used to be independent, and broadcast companies were owned by broadcast companies, But today, we have so many, we're down to where, who owns MSNBC? Well, then who owns that company? And who owns that company? And when you finally get down to the bottom, you find out that there's only 6 major corporations that own 95% of the media outlets that most people are even, exposed to. And as a result, these are corporations that are oftentimes involved in a wide variety of different products, services, and things, which is wonderful that they can do that. But when they're in charge of the journalism as well, then they're also in control of the kind of journalism that could expose some of the things they're doing. So the news is no longer the news. It's infotainment, and it is there not to serve the people as much as it is to serve the story of the owners and the donors and the advertisers. And unfortunately, news has become such big business that if you bite the hand that feeds you, you're out of business. So our news is no longer free. Our journalists are no longer free. And
It's
as
true.
a result, I mean, look, Phil Donahue for years had a very popular show that came to us from Chicago. Originally came from Philadelphia or something. I can't recall the details. But Phil Donahue had a talk show that was on 9 a.m. every morning for years and years and years. And then he eventually ended up working for even MSNBC. But as soon as he started questioning some of the party lines of what they're doing, he was fired.
Right. Right.
Cenk Uygur was also fired from MSNBC. Most of the news outlets have become extremely biased. Whereas I think that if you go back years and years and years, you could have a hard time figuring out whether or not a news organization was mostly conservative or mostly liberal or a mix of both. It could be because they reported the news. So I think journalism is extremely important to a democracy. But in order for journalism to function to the benefit of a democracy, journalism has to be unindebted. They can't be indebted to any government or corporate interest at all. And that just doesn't exist in any major journalistic outreach.
Okay, John Adams. Yes, John Adams said, remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide.
I think it could be very true if a democracy doesn't learn from its mistakes. I don't think it has to be true. But, as has often been said, as soon as in a democracy they discover they can vote over the purse, they begin extending to themselves all sorts of benefits, whoever's in control. And, so as a result, as soon as you look at the deficit that we have. We would not have a deficit if we believed in a taxation system that could pay its own way. The very fact that we have state governments, local governments, federal governments that are making decisions that require the borrowing of money, coming up with various other fundraising schemas, inventing new taxes, new fees for the purpose of it shows that they're either trying to involve themselves in programs we can't afford, or they're not really interested in an honest taxation system that taxes people to the degree that they really need to be taxed. Everyone thinks, well, do you want to pay more in taxes? The truth is, I don't care if I pay less or more in taxes if the net benefit of whatever we're doing is, I can afford to do what I need to do for myself if I'm not paying high taxes, or many of the things that need to be done, these taxes will make sure that they're done for me and many other people. As long as they get done, who cares how we, divvy up the purse? The chances are that those things that are more universal in need are probably best handled by some sort of government control or something like that. And things that involve individual preferences, I certainly don't think the government needs to be buying me my guitars. But not everyone plays a guitar, not everyone wants to, and not everyone would know what to do with one. But I think we all have bodies, and we have health issues and problems, so it strikes me as being something that's more useful. But a democracy, it's often been said that once it discovers it has control over the purse, it'll spend itself out of existence. And militarily, also, many democracies have failed because they tried to win the world for democracy. Bullshit. They didn't do any such thing. And look at how much discretionary spending we have for the military budget. It's crazy. It's crazy. But of course, then we don't even know how many military bases and then military plants or whatever we have throughout the entire globe. I mean, somebody knows this, but this is a hard number to actually accurately determine by you just going to Google and trying to figure out, some things are not considered military bases, or there may be, whatever. But what sort of human development theory and human nature theory are we subscribing to if we really think that this world requires that we have all those military bases all over the place, particularly when you see what they're doing? they're not defending freedom.
Right.
They're defending our corporate interests. And I think we do have corporate interests. But, in capitalism, supposedly these corporate interests are supposed to take care of themselves, not hire some big thug like the United States military to watch out for them, which I think is a lot of what they're doing. And by the way, that's both Democrats and Republicans. They've both been involved in that kind of scheme. And they're going to destroy us. And that kind of democracy, which isn't really democracy, will destroy us. So the way the democracies fail is that certain people learn how to get the real levers of that democracy working in their favor, and they in their greed and corruption end up running that democracy in the ground by turning people into the kind of lemmings that follow their ideology. And now let me say this about ideology. If you're a liberal, if you're a conservative, you're an idiot. And by that I mean this. Liberality is a way of looking at the world, its problems, and its solutions. It is not reality. It is a way of looking at reality. And reality is too big for anybody to actually look at directly. So this is a way of looking at reality. Conservatism is a way of looking at reality, its problems, and its solutions. Why in the world would you ever be loyal to a way of looking at reality while you're violating reality? So it seems to me that you should be a conservative and a liberal and everything else in between as ways of pursuing a way of trying to understand through the various lenses we have developed what's going on in reality. Since reality is so unmanageable, let's not live to a substitute, but let's use these substitute views as ways of informing ourselves, and let's use several of them so that we can understand our circumstances from several different points of view, and then come up with a way of balancing the resulting conundrums. But we don't do that, do we?
Ladies and gentlemen, yes, Bob Graves just knocked the ball out of the park. I mean, that was wonderful. That was a grand slam. That was good. Okay, next quote, and then I need to break Daryl in here. He's being too quiet. Okay, here it goes. In the Soviet Union, capitalism triumphed over communism. In this country, capitalism triumphed over democracy. I knew you would love that. I mean, come on. That's cute.
Well, money is power. And there was never any real communism going on in Russia anyway, nor in China. They have always been a facade, as has been capitalism. Capitalism has been a facade in America. If we really believed in capitalism, we would have never had bailouts. If capitalists can't, survive, they die, and they should, according to the rules of capitalism. So we live in everyone says, well, we don't want socialism. We have capitalist socialism in this country, and we've had it for a long time. Socialism for capitalists, but in fact, Noam Chomsky has made this. He said that the Union of Soviet Socialist Republic was a lie, and the lie that the Russians told about them being a socialist country, and the lie that we told about them being a socialist country, we're both lying, but for different reasons. The Russians were lying about them being a socialist country because the people wanted socialism, and so by saying, "Well, this is socialism that we're giving you," it isn't, But this was their way of giving the people a false hope. But we called it socialism because we didn't want to hurt capitalism the way we were doing it, and as a result, so we lied about them being socialist too. But in the end, I think it's true that the more that central banking took place, the more that people with a great deal of amassed wealth learned how to get a hold of the levers of power, became the chief donors to either people who were at the top of the Communist Party, or to people who were being reelected to offices that they had turned into careers in a democracy. Well, it didn't take long, and these wealthy people became the ones who were really in control. You know, we worry about presidents who are in the office. There's only so much a president can do a lot sometimes. We worry about the fact that there's so many people in Congress who are reelected and reelected and reelected, but you have no idea who these people are, who are
Right.
the major donors that are writing the actual laws, that are requiring the things that they expect to be serviced, so that these laws that go through really represent. I mean, Obama, when he hired his cabinet, we found it through the WikiLeaks emails that came out that that Citibank recommended certain people for cabinets, and every single person, I think, that was ended up in Obama's cabinet was somebody that Citibank said that's who we want. What a coincidence. That's amazing, you know?
Amazing.
Yeah, so these people have the levers of power, and they took over and destroyed whatever was going on in Russia. It had fell to capitalism, and they're doing the same thing here in America to democracy. Fascism is what happens whenever the wealthy have the levers of power, even if they make it look like you have a socialist country or a communist country or a democratic country or whatever. When they have the levers of power, when they control the people who possess the power, it's fascism.
Let's change the topic up a bit. I want to go to Daryl. Daryl, can you put on the table your experiences in church that is in the South? I mean, I said before, we played the clip a while ago. This is the typical church here in the South. What say you?
Well, I just want to relate to a statement that Bob made earlier, much earlier, when he was talking about education. And I can see that point probably as strong as anything that's been stated tonight, that it's actually a dumbing down process. You know, you can learn a lot of things possibly along the way, but unless you're being educated in a way that that lets you know what's really going on and teaches you how to think and to evaluate true situations rather than just be directed to think one way or another, then you haven't been educated. And to answer your question concerning, I'll just go from my own experience, and I don't think this is uncommon at all. I can get down to the point where the only thing that matters when you're voting is, is this person a Christian, quote, born again? And I think churches, I don't know about everywhere, but in the South, tend to vote in blocks more than anything else. I mean, the whole group's going to vote for a particular candidate because, they're told this guy embraces our values, that is, the Christian value. And unfortunately, that doesn't really cover all the issues. And if it's not that, if it's not church, then it's, too many times it's, I've voted Republican all my life, or I've voted Democrat all my life. And there's really no being educated on what's really going on with the country, in the country, with the vote, and so on and so forth.
Let me add something to that.
Yes.
It is interesting to note that both in the South and in the North, that in 1970, most Bible-oriented churches didn't want anything to do with politics. But by the end of the 70s, fundamentalist churches were deep into politics. That was a decade of radical change in that regard. And we might even forget that change took place. But there was a time when when most fundamentalist churches were just busy preaching the gospel and trying to bring people to Jesus, and they didn't realize just what power they could possess. We had things like the moral majority, and I think the rise of CBN and of the PTL Club began to organize people into a national group that then began to become much more politically active. And so by 1978, well, let me think of this. By 1979, most of the fundamentalist pastors I'm talking to are scolding people privately if they're not Republicans. And I'd never heard that in 1971 or 72.
I want to read a couple of comments here, and I hesitate because I've got so many coming in on my cell phone, believe it or not, private messages. People are really enjoying what you're saying, Bob. I'm really enjoying it myself.
Some are.
Yeah. Okay. Artemis makes this point. I'm not a Christian. However, this channel makes me feel less desperate regarding the retardation of logic and reason at the hands of theology / American Christianity. And he says, thanks. And so I think that's pretty good.
Well, I hear you. I hear you. Christianity has become an example of the height of dumbing us down. Just amazing. And it didn't have to be that way. It really didn't. But it has been that way.
Right.
Yeah.
There was something about Jake when he went into that church and he was looking at Roy Moore. It reminded me of Jesus. And if I might share this, when Jesus turned to the disciples and this lady, she's begging, oh, please, my daughter, she's got problems. Please help. And he says, I can imagine this. Oh, I was only sent to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. I could see Jesus playing the role of Jake in that, in that he's trying to get his disciples to see, are we not being ridiculous? I mean, come on, lighten up, guys. This lady needs some help. But I thought that was just, Jake was just too funny going into that particular church with Roy Moore. That was funny.
This was an open and a far more transparent Veritas type expose. But by the way, there are people on both the left and the right who are trying to trick people into exposing certain ideas. I'll tell you, one of the people on the right that is really good at getting some good comments is what is that guy's name? Is it Mr. Dice? Is it Mike Dice or something? I can't remember. But he'll sometimes go out on the beach and ask people, and you begin to realize just how uninformed Americans are about so much. We are so complacent. We are so apathetic. We're so caught up in our TVs, our movies, our movie stars, our pastime, and those of us who have money so caught up in the indulgence of the things we're doing. We don't really know what's going on in this country. We don't really know what's going on overseas. We don't know what our country is doing overseas. And we don't want to know, and we don't know what our own history is. It's like, who did we fight in the Revolutionary War? And some of these people can't answer the question. So what were the two sides in the Civil War? And they can't answer these questions. Makes you wonder, how can they function as, yeah.
Okay, I hate to cut this short. I'm really enjoying the dialogue here, but I just got a text from my wife. My mother has not been feeling well for the last 3 to 4 days, and I may be on my way to ER. And so,
well, let's close it down.
Yeah, let's get out of here. Hey, guys, if you like the show tonight, click like. We enjoy having you here. We're not perfect. We're just people who love humanity. And so we love you. With that said, we're out of here. Bye-bye.